Yesterday we were talking about Article 1 in the Constitution, and we said specifically that Congress has the main job of making laws, okay? And we mentioned that they have certain powers that are found in the Constitution. What do we call those? Aha, the enumerated powers. Fantastic. That is a list of your enumerated powers. And we said there were three of them that were more significant than the others. Tamo, what's one of them? Tax and spend. If you forget nothing else, do not forget the power to tax and spend. Right? The government loves to spend your money. They also like to declare war, and on top of that, if that wasn't enough, they like to regulate interstate commerce. In fact, they like to exercise all those powers. Okay, but beyond the enumerated powers, Congress also has the implied powers. All right, and implied powers are ones that they have that are not specifically spelled out in the Constitution, and they get those through the necessary and proper clause or the elastic clause. Okay, it says that Congress can make any laws they deem necessary and proper, so long as they are connected to the listed powers. All right, everybody on the wagon so far? Fantastic. Yes, the elastic clause is the necessary and proper clause. They're the same thing, which gives Congress the ability to make any laws that they think are necessary and proper as long as they're connected to the enumerated powers. So as long as they're connected or related somehow, then Congress has the authority to make that law. Okay? Now, yesterday we also mentioned too that there are certain things Congress can't do. And I think the last thing we talked about was your protection of habeas corpus. Is that correct? We didn't get to that yesterday? Okay, so we mentioned the elastic clause yesterday, and today we'll talk specifically about there are certain things written in the Constitution that Congress cannot do. It's a no-go. All right, remember we said early in the year that there's one of our ideas of political culture is limited government. There are some things that even the government is not allowed to do. And the original Constitution mentions three things that the government's not allowed to do. And the first one is they can't suspend the privilege of habeas corpus. Okay, I love it when they throw Latin terms in there. Do we have any Latin scholars in here? You don't need to be a Latin scholar to understand or to imagine. The word corpus, what does that look like in English? A corpse, a body. Okay, habeas corpus, roughly translated, means show me the body or produce the body. Okay, it's said that Ben Franklin used that as his pickup line. Habeas corpus. Man, this is a tough audience. Right? You can use that for a promposal. I wouldn't recommend it, but give it a shot. It's 2020. Anything can happen. Right? Now, habeas corpus, the privilege of habeas corpus is this. If authorities arrest you, they have to demonstrate evidence why they're arresting you. Okay? Meaning like produce the body, produce evidence. Okay? That phrase is actually, there's some different stories about how that came about. But the idea behind habeas corpus is that if authorities arrest you, they have to demonstrate evidence or show evidence why you're being arrested. You can't just arrest somebody arbitrarily. Like, let's say I work for the police department and I'm like, you know what? I always wanted to mess with old Connor over there. And I have him arrested and picked up because I think it'd be a funny joke. And I'll leave you in jail for a couple days. Nothing serious is going to happen to you. All right. Authorities can't do that. You can't arrest people arbitrarily. Arbitrarily means just randomly on a whim. All right. You cannot just arrest people unless you have evidence. Now, one thing that the Constitution does stipulate, it says you can suspend habeas corpus if there is a time of rebellion or insurrection. Can you think of any big rebellions that happened in the United States? There is one where a whole region of the country rebelled. That's not a trick question. Well, thank you. The Civil War. All right. And Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus so that he could round up Southern spies that he knew were spies, but he couldn't prove it. Think of this for a second, too. In your neighborhood, how many people could say in your neighborhood, or at least close to your neighborhood, where there's some drug activity or other illegal activity going on? For several of you, you're like, that's definitely the case. Okay, and it'd be nice sometimes if police would just go roll up in there and arrest that person because you're like, we all know they're doing something shady, right? But we can't do it that way. Okay, and if you get arrested for something, you can ask the judge. You'd be like, hey, they need to demonstrate why they're holding me, why on earth they're holding me. Ulysses S. Grant suspended habeas corpus so that he could round up members of the Ku Klux Klan. Right, so it's been done. Okay. Second thing you're protected from here, okay, other than habeas corpus, which, that's pretty significant. Second thing you're protected from, Congress can't pass what are called bills of attainder. Congress cannot pass what are called bills of attainder. This is any law that would punish you without the benefit of a trial. Okay? This is any law that would punish you without the benefit of a trial. To give you an example, let's say that Congress today decided that they were going to pass a law that says if you're caught shoplifting any amount of items in excess of $100, you don't get a trial, you don't get anything, you just cut your hand off right there. Oh, that would be an example of a bill of attainder, something that would punish you without the benefit of a trial. Right? I think it's a pretty good idea, Mia. I don't like shoplifters, right? Unless it's like a little item, then it's okay. Right? But that would be an example. And they're like, hey, Congress, you can't pass that. That's a bill of attainder. Any law that would allow for you to be punished without the benefit of a trial. Right? Also, too, we think about this. Sometimes do circumstances, do circumstances not quite bear out? Like, you ever gotten caught in a conversation or a chat where somebody comes in at the wrong moment and everything sounds really bad, but it's actually not? And you have to try to explain it, and they're like, sure, I totally believe that. And you're like, no, really, it's not what you think. Well, sometimes in criminal cases, this is true too. That's why we allow people to have a trial, so that they get a chance to tell their side of the story. All right. So you're protected in terms of habeas corpus. You also are protected that Congress can't pass a bill of attainder. I thought that was funny, but that's me. I didn't even make that meme. All right. The third protection you have from Congress, Congress cannot pass what are called ex post facto laws. All right. Congress cannot pass what are called ex post facto laws. Once again, we get another Latin phrase, but this one you might be able to reason out a little bit. What does post mean? After. And facto, after the fact, okay? An ex post facto law is any law that would try to punish you for doing something when it was not illegal, okay? It's any law that would try to punish you for doing something when it wasn't illegal, right? That's like, you guys remember this past year, what did they change the tobacco age to? 21, okay? So let's say that Elena over here, all right, because she is such a tobacco user, she went to the store as an 18-year-old. We're just going to pretend you're 18 for this purpose. She went to her regular gas station to get some Copenhagen because that's what she chews, and she got some as 18-year-old, and they're like, "Hey, Elena, just FYI, tomorrow the new law kicks in, and you have to be 21 to buy tobacco." And she's like, "Oh gosh, that's right." Well, ultimately, she comes in and ultimately she buys tobacco, and they try to punish her for doing something when it was not necessarily illegal. That's an example. Or how about this? We'll use a more localized one. What if I tell you that everybody has to use Dixon Ticonderoga pencils? Okay, and those Dixon Ticonderoga pencils. Tomorrow, you guys all come in with one, and you're like, "Oh, Mr. Scalise, we all have the pencils you requested." And I'm like, "Great! Now you all get 1 day of ALC." And Charlie is like, "Why? That's ridiculous." And I'm like, "Because you didn't have them yesterday." And you're like, "Scalise, yesterday it wasn't a law." And I'm like, "That's right, but I'm punishing you for it anyway." Is that kind of a jerk move? Definitely. All right. Let me ask you something. These three things up here, habeas corpus, Congress can't pass anything that suspends habeas corpus. They can't pass bills of attainder. They can't pass ex post facto laws. Why do you think they went to the trouble of putting those three things in the Constitution? Because they've been done in the past. All right. The British did them to them. Think of this for a second, too, a good way to remember it. Think of the things that matter to you. Like, do you have certain non-negotiables that you're like in a dating relationship? You're like, I have to have these. These are important. Whoever I'm dating has to have these qualities. Have you all figured that out yet to some extent? Charlie, what's one thing that you're like, gotta have? Gotta be tall. Why? Have you dated somebody that's shorter than you before? Really? Interesting. How many of you all, like, some of your non-negotiables are based on the fact that you've dated somebody like that before and it was an absolute train wreck? Collins, what's one of your qualities that you're like, I gotta have that? And did you date somebody who wasn't honest? And you're like, what the crap? And you probably said some expletives. Probably. Okay. Same thing here. America's like, we dated Great Britain, and these are some non negotiables. We're never doing this again. Next time we date a national government, it's going to be serious. Right? And we've been together for over 200 years. It's adorable. All right. Those are things that Congress can't do. Let's move on to Article 2 in the executive branch. Article 1 is all about the legislative branch. Okay. Article 1 in the legislative branch, they make the laws. Article 2 is about the executive branch. What do? They enforce the laws. Their job is to enforce the laws. Right? George W. Bush here. You all didn't get to experience the greatness of George W. Bush. Even liberals now are like, God, I wish we could have him back. All right? What's the main job? They enforce the laws. But here's the thing, the executive branch, there's actually millions of people who help enforce the laws in the country. Okay? There's a hierarchy, a structure. It's a lot like the Catholic Church. Right? Except who's at the top of this hierarchy? Who's in charge of the executive branch? The president, man. Okay? And let's talk about the qualifications to be president. Constitution has 3 requirements to be president. There's an age requirement. What's the age requirement? 35. Got to be 35 years of age, which is actually really young. Uh, Teddy Roosevelt's the youngest president to have ever served, and he was 41. That's my age. I can't imagine being president at my age. I mean, I'm like, I'm doing good if I feel like I can take care of you guys, much less manage a country, right? So you got to be 35 years of age. Pete Buttigieg was only 37 when he was running this past year, and I'm like, man, that is super young. And you guys are like, that's old. My parents are like older than that or that age. It's a little bit crazy. Okay, got to be 35 years of age. Second requirement, you have to be a natural born American citizen. Okay, a natural born American citizen. That's the language the Constitution uses, and we've interpreted that to mean that you have to have been born on American soil. Okay? Doesn't matter where your parents were from, doesn't matter your nationality, race, or anything before that. If you're born on American soil, you're automatically an American citizen. Charlie. So my aunt was born in Germany, but when her dad was like my grandfather, he was a Navy. He was on a base, naval base. And she was born on like the base in Germany, so she has citizenship in Germany and the United States. Yeah, and that still technically counts as American citizenship as a natural born citizen. If you're born on a military base or an American embassy somewhere, that still counts as being a natural born citizen. Okay? And people ask that question, and like nobody's ever taken it to court, like the president being that way. There was always the controversy. People brought up issues about Obama, and they're like, he's not really born in America, but he showed his birth certificate multiple times that indeed he was born in the United States. Hey, why do you think they'd put that in the Constitution, that you had to have been born in America? Why go to the trouble of pointing that in there? What is it? Not to prevent treason, but you're on the right path with that. What do they not want a president to ever have that somebody who might be from another country does have? An allegiance or a loyalty to another country above America. And they're like, hey, if you're born here, then that naturally is going to make you more inclined to care about America. Okay? And so, if you're born somewhere else, you can't be president. Do you have a question? No. All right. Now, something too, fun fact. Recently, somebody wanted to amend the Constitution so that they would take that clause out of the Article 2. It was a guy who was born in Austria and has been governor of California and a Hollywood movie star. Anybody know who it is? Arnold Schwarzenegger. I know, the governor. He wanted it taken out because he wanted to run for president. right? He's getting a little old now. I mean, he's in good shape, but he's 72. Come on, bro. All right. Now, that's your second requirement. You got to be a natural born citizen. All right. Third requirement, you had to have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. Okay. Third requirement, you had to live in the United States for at least 14 years. Great question. They probably threw out different numbers to negotiate with that with, but they said, you know what? If you've lived in the country for at least 14 years, you probably have a decent understanding of what American culture is and what the people expect. Okay? And back then, it was not uncommon for people to study abroad or spend significant time in another country. Okay? To my knowledge, there's never been a question about anybody meeting that requirement. Now, there's only those three requirements to be president, even though we put a lot of informal stuff. Like, for example, for the last 4 years, what had people been demanding to see from Donald Trump? That got exposed in the newspaper anyway. Tax returns. Not only that, what do a lot of people think we should have from the president regarding his fitness to serve? Your health records. Okay. A lot of them want, like, a lot of people think that they should turn over their health records because think of it this way: like, what if Billups over here is running for president and it turns out she's got some debilitating disease where she's not going to be able to serve? Or imagine this, like, for example, right now, Trump's team, and I don't believe this is necessarily true, but they're like, we believe Joe Biden has early onset dementia. Well, what would that do to his chances of winning if it turned out like it was true? It would crush them. There's no way he would win if it turned out like medical records turned up for that case, or even things like, for example, fun fact: there was a study of presidents up through 1974, and what percentage of presidents do you think exhibited signs of mental illness? Roughly half, which is about what you get with the American public in general. That 50% of people at some point in their life have some type of mental illness, and it may not be like forever, but it may be anxiety related, depression related, manic depressives, bipolar, and alcoholism. I mean, it's pretty astounding. So we probably rule out a lot of good leadership that way. Okay, when a president's elected, those are your qualifications. How long do they serve? 4 years, okay? And how many terms are they allowed to serve according to the original Constitution? They didn't. In the original Constitution, there was no term limit, okay? It kind of became an informal rule for a long time that George Washington served 2 terms, and if two was good enough for Washington, well, who you think you're better than George Washington? No. Then along came Emperor Roosevelt, and good old Franklin Roosevelt got elected to 4 terms. All right, he's like, forget conventional standards, forget it all. 4 terms for me. All right, and after that, they amended the Constitution. The 22nd Amendment limits you to 2 terms. Okay, not to be confused with 2 Chainz, the rapper. That could be your all's rap name. 2 terms with a Z. What do you think? With a Z. All right, now let's talk about the president's powers listed in the Constitution. There are several, but there's 2 for our purposes right now that we need to know about. One of them is the president's authority to veto laws passed by Congress. Veto means to forbid. Okay, another Latin term. If Congress passes a law, the president has the ability to say no. All right? He has the ability to stop it from happening. Why on earth would they allow the president to do that if the lawmaking body wants it? How would they do that? No, not a bad guess. What's the overarching fear of everybody in America, especially the anti federalists? That the government is going to be too powerful. Okay? And they said, look, even a lawmaking body might get a little out of hand, a little bit crazy. And so you want to give the president the ability to stop something bad from happening if it's a bad law. And so the president has the ability to be like, no. All right? Much like Neo in The Matrix. You guys ever seen The Matrix? Or he's just like, no, and he stops all the bullets. Or have you all seen Lord of the Rings? Gandalf, where he's like, you shall not pass. Never mind, 2001. Yes, it is. All right. So the ability to veto legislation, he can say, no, it's not going to happen. All right. And that's a big thing there because imagine if you worked really hard as a member of Congress to get everybody on board with a law you want passed, and the president's like, I don't see it happening. I'm just going to give that a no. Oh, man. Second big power the president has, he's the commander in chief. The commander in chief. Not commander and chief, the commander in chief. All right? It means he's the chief of all commanders. He's in charge of what? The military, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, and now the Space Force, too. Oh, don't tell the Marines, but they're technically part of the Navy. They don't like it when you bring that up. Oh. Hey, this is kind of weird because the president's in charge of the military, but who has the authority to declare war? Congress does. Why did they divide up war-making power? And why is that a bad thing? Yeah, remember, overarching principle is we're terrified of an overly strong national government. So we'll put one group in charge of declaring war, and then we'll put somebody else in charge of directing the military. Okay? Now, Congress. Why is it a good idea to have Congress declaring war? Why not give the president that ability to declare war? He's one person, and then an entire group can debate it. How many of your all's parents or grandparents like to rant about stuff that drives them nuts in the world? Didn't you all have those? My dad likes to rant, and if he had been given the authority to, as one person, to declare war, he would have blown up a third of the world by now. Like North Korea, be a parking lot. It's really terrible. Okay? A deliberative body can talk about whether or not it's a good idea to go to war. Okay? But when you get to the president, once you've declared war, why is it a good idea to put a single person in charge of a military operation? Why would you not want Congress in charge of directing the military? And what does that do to a military operation? You can't run a military if everybody's debating all the time. In a military operation, you need one person in charge to make decisions. Otherwise, you won't make any decisions. Can you imagine Congress trying to direct the military in World War II? Good Lord. They're like, do we go on D-Day or do we not? And like, well, it could be a lot of lives lost. We could kill a lot of Germans, but I don't know how to affect us. Well, maybe the weather's not going to be great. It'd be nuts. You need somebody to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Okay? President, according to Article 2, also has a cabinet of advisors. All right? We'll talk about them in detail later on, but all we need right now to know is that the president has several advisors who are policy experts on certain areas. And they give the president advice about what to do, and it's helpful. You've got some go-to people who give you advice in life. At least I would presume so. Anybody got a go-to, a BFF that you're like, they can give me advice? I can trust them. It's good to have advisors. Last thing in Article 2 we want to mention, we've already talked about, the president can be impeached and removed from office. Hey, remind me real fast, somebody, what's one reason a president can be impeached according to the Constitution? Treason's one. Give me another one. They took yours, didn't they? Ah. Bribery. Treason, bribery. And the third one is the tricky one, other high crimes and misdemeanors. Okay? And that's really vague. All right? Let's go to Article 3, man. All right? The judicial branch, the redheaded stepchild of the three branches. Congress, they make the laws. The president enforces the laws. What does the judicial branch do? They interpret the laws. We'll put it a little bit more broadly. You're technically right, but they interpret it a little bit more broadly. What they're going to do is interpret the laws. So, for example, the Constitution says we are protected from cruel and unusual punishment. Who gets to define what cruel and unusual is? The courts do. All right? I think we should be allowed to cut people's fingers off. What do you think? No, why not? That'd be a good punishment. It's not. Is it cruel or unusual? All right, how about ripping their fingernails out instead? They grow back. Yeah, like I could deal with that. What, maybe your toenails too? How about a nice little bamboo shoot under the fingernails? No? How about cutting your eyelids off? Is that cruel and unusual? Well, ultimately, the courts get to decide, okay? And there are thousands of courts across the United States, but for our purpose, we need to deal with in the judicial branch. It mentions the highest court in the land, and I'm not talking about elevation, okay? The Supreme Court. They're the last interpreters of the law. This is the pictures inside the Supreme Court chambers. It's uh, very intimidating, and it's made to look that way on purpose. But the U.S. Supreme Court, they ultimately interpret what the law means. Okay? There are, and you can count them up here, but there are 9 justices or judges on the Supreme Court. That number's not in the Constitution, but we've kind of settled on that for the time being. So you got these 9 justices or judges who are on the Supreme Court, and they get the final say in how law and the Constitution are interpreted. Well, that sounds like fun. All right, let's talk about qualifications to be on the court. There's always an age requirement, right? How old do you have to be on the Supreme Court? What do you think? 30, 40, 50, 100, 35, 25? I'm just messing with you. There's no age requirement to be on the Supreme Court. In fact, there are no requirements at all. Not a single one. Nothing mentioned in the Constitution. You all, in theory, could be on the Supreme Court. What is it so odd, Kaiser? I would trust your judgment on some things. Right? There are no requirements. You don't need a law degree. You don't even need to be a citizen. Okay? No, you don't need a law degree. John Marshall didn't have a law degree. He turned out to be the best Supreme Court justice ever. You don't even need a high school diploma. Yeah, you're like, I'm there. All right. Now, how do you get one of these wonderful jobs? You're appointed by the president. Okay. And the way this president's going, Charlie, anything's possible. And it's 2020. All right. You're appointed by the president. So Donald Trump decides that he's going to throw your name into the mix, Charlie. And there's a problem, though. Okay. Even though the president appoints you, the Senate has to approve you. They have to give their approval for somebody to take a seat on the Supreme Court. All right. And Charlie, the Senate, before they voted on you, they would be like, well, Miss Charlie, what are your qualifications to be on the court? And you would be like, well, I had Mr. Scalise for AP Gov. And they're like, oh, you're in. They're like, well, it's a pretty solid qualification right there. All right. So ultimately, that's what's going to be the thing that kind of interprets what needs to be there or not. Tama, question? Did they approve of her, the new one? They have not yet. They have not met to consider that. Amy, and I always forget her name now, but Trump's current appointee to the court. He's going to try to get this appointee done before January, because if he does, he realizes he might lose the election. All right, and if he's able to get this nominee through, Trump will have appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, literally a third of the court. Okay, now here's why this is relevant. How long does a Supreme Court justice serve? Until they retire or die. They get a lifetime appointment. Okay? They get a lifetime appointment. And also, when presidents appoint somebody, they're looking for somebody like-minded, okay, who would make decisions in a way similar to them. Right? So if I'm president, I want to find somebody who's like me, who's like-minded. So Kaiser, you're in luck. There's an opening on the court. Right? TMJ, problems. Okay, I know people understand the struggle. All right. Now, if I appoint somebody to the court, I talk to them ahead of time and I let them know specifically, like we do a complete investigation. And then I'm like, Kaiser, if you take this job, I want to know that you're going to be on the court for the next 20 to 30 years. All right. Because we don't want to do this in 5 years. All right. So Kaiser's like, okay, I'm down with that. And we do a medical check, medical history. Kaiser doesn't have any, serious medical problems. And she's like, well, high school stress, I'm like, don't worry. This is the least stressful job ever. Their schedule's great. You work October to June. All right. And it's a $200,000 a year gig, plus a lot of perks. But that's beside the point. All right. So the Senate would confirm you, and then I have somebody like-minded on the Supreme Court. And the strange thing is that Donald Trump's influence will be felt long after he's gone. All right. And look, if he wins another term, it's possible he could get 1 to 2 more Supreme Court justices because they are all getting older, and some of them are looking forward to retirement, and some of them, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, died rather suddenly. So you never know what could happen. All right. Now, for some of you, that's kind of frightening. You're like, a Supreme Court, uh, excuse me, a Supreme Court dominated by Trump appointees. Now, here's the downside of that for Trump, and he's realized this too. Uh, what do conservatives like? What are they hoping to change in interpretation, the interpretation of over the next couple years? What's the one thing conservatives are like? We got to change this. Abortion laws and abortion court rulings. The same court ruling about abortion has stood up for more than 45 years, and they're hoping if they get enough conservative judges on the court, which they have right now, they would get a change. Well, right now there's 5 conservative justices and 4 that lean more liberal. This summer, they had a case about abortion, and John Roberts, the chief, who's pretty conservative, and one of Trump's appointees, Neil Gorsuch, they sided with the liberals in this case to not restrict abortion. And Trump was pretty furious about it because 2 conservative judges sided with the liberal group. And that's the thing, though. Once they get on the court, they don't owe anybody. Like the president has no authority over them after that, and the American people don't vote them in, so they can do their job pretty effectively. Talk about the last parts of Article 3. It's probably tomorrow. I'll have something uploaded for you fine people, and that'll be that. We'll get into the other articles of the Constitution.